Hi, my name is Dovid B. Timeless. I am a Jewish mystic, and I'm here to answer your questions, so please feel free to ask questions. Getting high is part of Torah, as we see, and particularly in smoking, because we see that the gematria of smoke, which is smoke in Hebrew is Ashan, an acrostic for Olam, Shana, Nefesh, for world, time, and soul, has the gematria of 420. And when, there's this kind of natural ripple in life, and when people come on to it, suddenly it sticks, and pretty soon everyone's smoking herb at 420. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people. It's kind of a time of communion. Of course, happens all through all the light, the time zones. So somewhere in the world, it's always 420. And it's good to get high. Why is it good to get high? Because we live in a very physical world, and the thing of physicality draws down. When I was a kid, and my father was into astronomy, back in the 50s. And when he explained to me how the world is really round and there's no top to it, very difficult for me to understand. And to compound it, I asked him, well, then what keeps us from falling off? I was very visual in my thinking. And I just saw this round thing with everyone standing in different directions, like I was at the top, because I stand up straight. And but what kept us on from flying off into space? He said, gravity. So I said, gravity? What's gravity? So he started screaming at me, gravity, gravity. I got the picture. It's another dogma, something I found out later, that no one knows what gravity is. Big mystery. According to the Torah, and Torah means teaching. And in a teaching, one is expected to ask questions. The teaching itself asks questions and tries to explain everything, because this is the Torah. It says God looked into the Torah to create creation, and that's the the blueprint for creation. What does that mean? That a teaching is based on logic, right? If you're just telling someone facts, then I guess it's sort of like just academia, where you get a lot of facts. Or if you're just teaching someone, the way it is, dogma, the authority, that's not a teaching. A teaching is an interplay between a teacher and a student. And what does the teacher want? The teacher wants that his student should learn something. And if he doesn't ask any questions, then maybe he's not learning anything. Maybe yes, maybe no. So I do encourage you to ask questions. And so that's the idea, that God looked into the Torah, meaning like looked into a way that everything would be conglomerated into logic. And this is what we know as cause and effect. I mean, that doesn't have to happen. You don't have to throw the ball up and it has to come down. That's because of gravity. And what is gravity? So the Torah explains that there are 4 elements. Now, the top element, fire, it goes up. And the next element, air, well, it spreads out. Water flows down. And earth contracts into itself. And that nature of earth to contract into itself is gravity. And actually, in the very beginning of the four elements, there was the earth, and water covered the earth, and air covered the water, and fire covered the whole thing. But God saw in that way that when it got cold, that all the water would freeze. And if they're going to be fish, they would all freeze to death. So God commanded water against the nature of water, which is to cover, and commanded the water to seek a depth. And that's what then illuminated that we actually have 7 continents. And as a not a response, as a I guess there was a response from this, that of changing the nature of water one way, so it changed it another way, which was that all things in the world freeze from their center, except for water, which freezes on its surface, which again protects all the life inside the water, allows the water to remain water. And it's very cool how like ice forms upon it, and there are like the empty spaces there where it separates from the water. You know, it floats on the water, but there's like a lot of empty where air pockets. People get stuck under the ice. They can go into these air pockets, you know, if you're one of these brave dudes, you know, and survive. Me, I just give up. That's it, man. You know, but anyways, so that, anyways, that, you know, that's what gravity is about. And so the whole idea, like, of Torah is to really illuminate what is going on, and everything is supposed to be logical. Therefore, if someone asks a question, they expect a logical response. And if one doesn't have a logical response, they'll, you know, start yelling at you, you know, gravity, you know. Yes, yell at you the dogma, and everyone says, yeah. And, you know, recently someone said something to me about gaslighting. And I said, you know, I've heard the term, I really have no idea what it's about. You know, I think of someone lighting a light outside. And she had to admit she had no idea what it meant either. Because a lot of times people like talk this jargon, and, you know, it's just all to sort of recognize we're all using the same, you know, reading off the same play sheet. But the problem is that this is not real. This is like a huge lie. And everyone's waking up. I think this time will be known as the, you know, the era of the lie, because everything about it is just this huge fucking lie. I mean, it's unbelievable. You know, Bob Dylan, you know, said it best, as he always does. He said, you put all the truths together in this world, it comes up to one big lie, and that's the truth of it. And it starts from the lie of the Big Bang, and the lie of evolution, and the lie of this history where the human being comes out of an ape and is primitive until our time, and we're the highest human being that ever was, because we have contraptions and go up to Mars. We don't seem to be able to put a toilet in downtown LA, but, you know, and that's their rationale for the way they look at history. And this is just not true. And it's so, you know, provably not true. I mean, in any sort of ways. I mean, it just took it, you know, if you look at these, you know, languages that Abraham introduced into the world, the first phonetic languages of Arabic and Hebrew and later Sanskrit. And you know, the only language we can come up is computer language, which just it just keeps reverberating between 0 and nothing. That is a crude machine. That's all it can do. But we have languages. The reason we have languages is because I mean, we're human beings. I mean, that separates us from the animals. You know, I mean, animals have all the things that we got. You know, they got brains and emotions. They have empathy. They got the whole trip. But what they don't have is the ability to articulate thoughts into speech. If they did, we would be in competition with the animals for this earth, and believe me, they would win. But God made it so, made us like we're in charge because only we can speak. So in the truth, God speaks and we speak, and really nothing else speaks. Angels don't speak, and entities don't speak. I mean, there's things that pass through them, words and stuff like that, but they don't have this idea and speak it out. They're just kind of vessels. Animals don't speak. I mean, they speak emotionally. They bark or they purr, but they don't articulate thoughts. And that's where the human being is different from everything else on this earth, and that's why we're in charge of the earth. And this earth is a very, very special place. Why is it a special place? Because there's life on this earth. We've never found life anywhere, not even the components of life. If they find water, it's hip, hip, hooray. There's water all through the universe. So we're not surprised to find water. But where there could be water, there could be life. There could be a pot of gold also, but I don't think so. And that's the big lie of the Big Bang theory, that life just happens. Given enough time and enough matter, it'll coalesce and something will come out, and and it'll be us. I mean, this is so absurd that it's absurd to say it's absurd. It is just ridiculous. But no one gives it much thought, because that's what they teach us in school, our children in school, until today. They're teaching them this crap, and it's very bad for a child who really doesn't know anything and is trying to construct in their own mind what reality is, looking up in the sky, and what are those things up in the sky, those little points up in the sky. And it's a real question that human beings have been asking for like thousands of years, ever since there was human beings. What is it? And there are many, many really true explanations. But one of those is not the Big Bang theory. That's just absurd. And I don't know. I've talked about that before. I don't know if I want to go into it again right now. If someone asks me a particular question, I will. But, and talking about questions, it was just sort of introductory into something. But someone did send me a question. Carol from Toronto. Thank you very much, Carol. I appreciate that people should ask me questions, because, it's hard to teach without questions. You kind of lecture, which is a different thing. So Carol asked that I should explain, to the extent I can, about sleep and about dreams. And that's a cool topic, and certainly lots in the Torah about sleep and dreams, in the written Torah itself, and then the expositions of it in the Talmud and the Zohar, and they say crazy things. One of the crazy things they say, if my memory is correct, I believe it is, I don't vouch for it, but I think it is, that people, if a man dreams that he's having sex with his mother, somehow that's a good omen. So I never really went into the dreams too much. To me, it's just all crazy stuff, and I'm just more into logic. But there are dreams, and there's different types of dreams. The Talmud speaks about this. There are just dreams that happen because of what we think about. Like if these men that don't masturbate, if they think about women a lot, when they go to sleep, they're likely to have a wet dream, which is a sign to a man that he should watch out what he's thinking about. It's not a particularly comfortable experience. And often it comes along with very odd dreams. Obviously, that's why it's called a wet dream. In Hebrew, it's called mikra laila. There's nothing in Torah that's not spoken about openly. Mikra laila means happens at night. It can happen in the daytime too, but generally it happens at night. And because of what we're what we're thinking. That's one type of dream. And there's other types of dreams that just, the question is, where do we go when we dream? And how much of us go there? So it says that one part of what goes, before what goes, what's here? What's here is the soul. So I often tell people when I'm reading tarot cards that their soul is engraved out of the star, which is true. As where are the heavens? They're up there. We're around us is heaven. And not precisely. It's actually halfway between the moon and the earth. That starts heaven. And yeah, and so the soul attaches to us through a little line of light, comes into the right side of our brain. And that's what enlivens us. And when the angel of death comes, he comes with a pair of scissors and he clips that cord. And it's funny, we came in, they clipped the cord. When we go out, they clip the cord. And the light that people describe, people who have claimed to have come close to death, they say that they saw the light, they saw this great light, and the light they see is the light of their soul. And that's where they go. They go back to their soul, but usually not all the way back, because usually, you get caught in kind of the web of things you did on this earth and probably have to come back again. But the hardest thing about heaven, about going through this process, obviously, dying cannot be pleasant, but obviously, we're human beings. That's what we do. And God's kind. I'm sure it's kinder than what it looks like. And but anyways, the cord is cut, and we go back with our soul. And there's whole descriptions, all these different things that happen. When we dream, it says that dreaming is 60th of death. And understand from that there's 60 parts, 1/60th of the soul remains in the human body, and that keeps our organs working and our mind thinking. Our eyes are shut off, our ears, our brain is like really diminished, in its value. And the same with all the things. I remember I was in boot camp. As in the Navy, they could do anything to you. It was draft, and they could do anything to you. So we had to split someone's watch. And you're so, as a kid at 17 years old, and used to like sleeping, and you only got like 4 hours sleep. If you had to share a watch, then you only got 3 hours sleep. And I woke up when they got my head in this this metal garbage can. And the DA or whatever you call it, dude, and the DA is beating on it with a with this club. And suddenly I woke up, and everyone got a good laugh out of that, But it shows to how deeply one can sleep. We can learn to sleep standing up, or bunched together, or the human body is pretty amazing what the human body can adapt to. But when we're asleep, we're just barely there. And and it's interesting because when we wake up, we sense that we slept. But if you pass out, or if you take an anesthesia, I think that's right. That when you wake up, it's like you didn't go to sleep. And just a side note about sleep, that it says, that there's two types of sleep. There's types of sleep where the guy's nodding off and you wake him up, and what does he inevitably say? I wasn't asleep. And then there's people who are just asleep, and you wake them up and they say, oh, thanks, I fell asleep. And that's kind of two kind of people dealing with reality. That one guy's asleep, but he can't admit that he's asleep. You can show him this proof, that, nothing's going to change his mind. He's not asleep. And the other person already is asleep, but he knows he's asleep. And he's thankful to be waken up. And so the question is, where does a person go when they sleep? They don't go to heaven because we're on the earth. But between the terrestrial earth and halfway to the moon, this is also considered the earth. And see, it seems obvious to me, though, it's hard to really show where it is in places that actually says it, but it seems obvious to me that from just the description in the Torah and everything that we know, that they were very joint. What's the word I want? I can't say it. Anyways, they were very good at navigating through the skies, and it seems they had a way of being ephemeral or somehow being able to work against the the gravity. And they actually lived in that realm, and at times came down to the earth where there was the more crude human being. And is mentioned many times in the Zohar, particularly other places maybe, that when these entities, there are many entities out there in heaven, and generally they're not allowed to come down here, but some of them, either they get through or they're allowed for some reason, there are certain ones come down here. And when they hit the atmosphere, it's described in the Zohar numerous times, when they hit the atmosphere, they take on a human form. And you can't tell the difference of them. You could be like sitting next to them in a restaurant, whatever. There's no way to tell. And some people are entities, and they come for a certain reason. They do certain things. There's also a lot of invisible stuff, angels that come, and it is, if you could see all that's happening out there, it'd be like a wall. And we kind of know there's lots of germs and stuff like that, but germs are still physical, but there are really like spiritual stuff out there. And so that's where we go when we dream. There's structures that are still left there. Most of it has disappeared. That happened at the time of Abraham 400 years ago, called the Dor HaFlaga, when everything separated, heaven separated from earth, and it became more difficult to come down here in the earth. And the thing about heaven, about dreams in this atmosphere, is not heaven, but anything can happen. That's why dreams are anything can happen, because you don't have the kind of the physicality holding it back. Let me just look here, because someone has written me something, so let me look. Someone asked me if I'm Ashkenazi. Well, no, I'm not Ashkenazi. Maybe my mother might have had some Ashkenazi, but my father, that's where we take our tribe from. My father was, my grandfather was from Ukraine. And the way they got from Ukraine is they went from Spain, like hundreds of years ago, during the Inquisition, when people, a lot of people say that Columbus was Jewish, but from what he did, I don't think so. We might have a lot of Jewish people with him, because he left at the beginning of the expulsion, where Jews had to either bow down to the cross or leave the country or be tortured to death. And not much of a choice there. But anyway, so my lineage came from Spain. And so, I think it's kind of obvious from our features and all that we are more on the Sephardic side. And as someone else asked me, oh, no, she didn't ask me anything. But thank you, Shane. Anyways, I'm happy to share my knowledge with people. And if you have a particular question, it seems it's a good use of the internet. And I think I like to do it 420, because I feel a lot less inhibited. One of the nice things about herb, and you should know that herb, well, the word cannabis comes out of the Torah, cannabosim. It was one of the ingredients used to perfect the 11 spices. Like you know, I think they're like buried in it or something. That's my sense. I don't know. But they found some of this incense, from 2,000 years ago, and they used to use it. It was a very intricate way they put it together, and they didn't just make a little bit of it; made a whole lot of it. And they took it and they buried it in the Sinai. And recently they discovered it, maybe 30, 40 years ago. And the rabbis wouldn't let them light fire to it, but they would let them light a little bit, using electricity. I had to do it with the law and everything. And so there's all these accounts of it where people said that, the people around it, they got in their clothes, even not even burning it, just being around it. It got into their clothes, and people became very happy. And also, one of the odd things that happened is all the bugs disappeared, flies, everything. And that's one of the miracles of the temple, that even though they shechted animals, they slaughtered animals there, and there were offerings on the altar of flesh, offerings of animals, and uh, what I want to say. Oh yes, and they weren't any flies. Who could have thunk? You got all this place, and there's no flies. You ain't got any screens. And I wouldn't say it's the incense because there's a miracle, but this is one of the things that they noticed with the incense. And certainly people who went to the temple, that's one of the things that their experience there, because people were supposed to be happy there. You're not allowed to go there and be unhappy, because we're supposed to serve God b'simcha. Simcha means happiness. Ivdu Hashem b'simcha. Serve God with happiness. So one of the illustrations of this is Chaim Vital, the great scholar who gave us wrote down all the books of his teacher, the Arizal, which is the Kabbalah, which opens up the Zohar. And he was once traveling on a ship, and one of the sailors went to the side and pissed off the ship, and a wind came up and blew it all on him, on Chaim Vital. And the story is, he raised his hands to heaven and said, God, if you want me pissed on, I accept it with happiness, with simcha. And even people who went into the gas chambers during the Holocaust, that some went in dancing, because they said, I've served God all my life with simcha, with happiness. And I'll do this. If I'm going to die like this, I'll die dancing. And at the temple, people would go, and there was just tremendous happiness, to the extent that the commandment said no one should have fear in Yerushalayim. So when they built these very tall walls, that that they built them, each stone was an inch back. Archaeologists can see this. And what's the reason for that? Because that little bit of adjustment of these huge stones made it so when you looked up, it didn't look as though everything was falling on you, and you would suddenly become afraid. But you look up and it looks straight. So these people, 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, these were not primitive people. These were not somehow lesser people because they didn't have a TV, or an iPhone or some, these people were giants. They were just giants. They were giants in intellect. They were giants in their relationship with the Creator and creation, and we should learn from them. Someone else said. Oh, someone retracted their message. All right. Anyways, so, all right. Well, I've been doing this for 30 minutes. I kind of the time that I've set for myself. I don't know if I answered all these questions about dreaming. I mean, I think it's just interesting to know that where we are, that we're not in ourselves. We're really in a different dimension, and different things can happen. Sometimes I go on that in the morning, it says that's when there's prophetic dreams. Sometimes you have a dream that's prophetic. But we should always know, and this is very important to know, that no matter what is the dream, good or bad, that, I mean, if we're frightened by it, we see something that we're afraid of. The main thing to know, God is everywhere, to everybody, all the time. If you're there in heaven, earth, wherever you are, God is there. And you can always turn to God. That's the thing about being alone, that you're never really alone. And sometimes you're closer with God when you're alone. And sometimes there's things that happen to us in life that even though we have people around, but we feel very alone. And we should turn to the wall. That's kind of the ancient saying, the king turned to the wall. You turn to the wall and you talk to God. I mean, there's no one, it's a sign that there's no one between you and God. So, people shouldn't be afraid. We're not here alone. Gravity isn't our master, and we can get high every now and then and get above it all, get a new look at it all, get a little relief from the gravity pulling us down, because eventually it's going to pull us down into the ground, and that will be a lifetime. I didn't mean to end on a bad note. That's not really a bad note. It's just, we live in cycles. We go up, we go down, and then we go beneath the line, we go above the line. So one is heaven and one is earth, and we're always somewhere. And the 0 point is just the place of demarcation, of transference, and everything's cool because God's cool. God loves us. God loves creation. And God wants to communicate with us, wants a dira b'taktanim, wants to be known in a low place. And the truth is, no one's lower than us. All right. Keep ending on a bad note, but not so bad. A little humility is good for times, particularly hard times. Anyways, thank you very much for listening. Oh, someone asked me. You asked me a question. Someone asked me. I lived in Israel for 10 years. I lived in Tzfat from 1980 to 1990. Tzfat is the city in the north. There are four cities, according to we're talking about the elements, four cities for each element. And the element of earth is where Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were buried. The element of fire is Jerusalem, where the altar was for both flesh and incense. And then water is Tiberias, and Tzfat is air. It says the air of Israel makes you smarter. Tzfat is the city of air. And that's where the Kabbalists arose. That's where the Zohar was written. I lived there for 10 years, and I would have stayed, but I have a problem that I'm not able to deal with sound very well. And even though I can read in Hebrew, and I study in Hebrew, and I know Hebrew, but I can't hear Hebrew. I just can't remember the sounds. I don't like him to say my name in Hebrew. But, so that drove me back to America. I just felt that, you can't talk to the people you're living with. I mean, it's a drag, And so that's the reason that I left. So happy to answer your questions. Thank you for listening to or watching my my broadcast here. And I invite you to go to my website, dovidhouse.com. And I have my new book, Sex, a Metaphor to History, Trump, 777 and the 1,000 Years of Woman, highly recommended. I also have a course there based on my book, Kabbalistic Tarot, which was published by Inner Traditions, so even like over 15 years ago. And so, anyways, that would be a big help. Having people, buy your stuff and review it is really, it's the best help, man, because it shows there are people out there who think, um, good. Please read my new book. It would be it's a beautiful book. It's something really new. It's truly just mind blowing. And anyway, so together, the whole point of this is to change the world. The world is going to change anyways. And maybe next time I'll do a thing about COVID, because COVID is obviously a sign from the Creator, because as three meanings in Hebrew, but I think the most noted one, COVID, is respect. Cool. All right. Thank you so much. See you later. Have a great evening, and be well. Protect yourself. Wearing a mask is an act of love because it protects other people more than it protects you. Bye.